So, I accidentally created the most dangerous taser staff. And let's just say it went wrong. A lot. I took something that I made in a cave with a box of scraps and took it way too far. And somehow, by the end of this video, it actually works. And as always, before we begin, make sure you don't try this at home. This is for educational purposes only, and if you did it yourself, you'd get hurt. So you've been warned. I started off this project by going to Home Depot and getting a metal pipe that could fit all of my electronics in it. Then I measured a point around halfway through and started cutting it in half. I then severed it in half and prepped it for the next part. My next task was designing the central hub that would hold the taser modules and the electric tips. I hopped into SolidWorks and got it designed up fairly quickly, and then headed on to measuring out and cutting all the tips that would be used as the tasers. There was nothing too fancy that went on here. I was mainly just bending them so it would look good and rounding the tips. Shortly after that, I got myself some 6-volt taser modules from Amazon and went ahead and seated them in the central hub with the tips in place. My next task was getting the trigger, switch, and charging port in place. How I did this was I took each part and used an X-Acto knife to scrape a vague silhouette of what they would look like in the pipe and getting them ready for cutting. Once I had all those silhouettes carved out, I took a Dremel and spent an ungodly amount of time dremeling out each hole and measuring the parts in it to make sure they would fit and glue well. I then threw a coat of black spray paint on. With the pipe finished, I analyzed my next daunting task, which was getting all of these electronic parts soldered up inside the pipe. To start this off, I cut the USB charger out of its shell and prepped it for the USB-C adapter that I was going to solder onto it. After this, it was just a matter of getting the USB-C soldered up to the charger, all the switches soldered in line, and the batteries up to the head of the taser, where the arcs would inevitably be. And this turned out fairly nice, with the wiring being a huge pain in the butt, but I was able to get it all inside of the pipe, and there was room to spare for me to get it all up to the end of the taser. With that being done, the next thing I needed to do was design a trigger for this that would look cool. So I went ahead and hopped into SolidWorks and spent a buttload of time sketching out a trigger I thought would look cool and might be practical. Once I had a vague sketch of the trigger out, I needed to design a hinge for it that would be able to support the trigger while being 3D printed with a 10mm metal pin in the middle, acting as the hinge pin. Not long after that, I got my 10mm metal rod and cut out the length I needed to be the hinge pin. After that, it was just a matter of getting the hinge glued together with the trigger and pin in place. Mind you, I wish I knew in advance not to design the hinge as two solid parts, as getting them glued in place and getting them to stick was a huge pain. With that hinge finally glued in place and all the switches wired up, I officially had one half of this taser spear finished up and it was ready for testing. Got one half of the Mark 7 done. Behold. Feeling lucky after the first half, I moved on to the second half, where I totally intentionally cut a hole through the middle of the charging circuit. But don't worry, I got a new one. With only a few tasks remaining, I decided to get the second head of the second half soldered up, comparing it to the first half, and making sure it was perfectly symmetrical for my perfectionism. So we got both halves of the Mark 7 finished. With that frighteningly loud result, I needed my last piece to the puzzle, which was the hinge that would go in the middle, connecting both halves of this double-ended taser spear. Now mind you, this hinge was not easy to model, but eventually I got it finished. Not long after, I put it into a SolidWorks assembly to make sure the hinges worked alright. With that finished, I was onto the final product. And here we have it, the finished double-ended taser spear. It is quite nice. The hinge folds perfectly, fully 3D printed, doesn't break. So, with all of that finished, I made easily the most dangerous 5-foot-long double-ended taser staff. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if you didn't, leave a dislike. Till next time.